which means we are going over our waiver wire targets. We're going to talk about a couple quarterbacks. We're going to cover 6 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, and 3 defenses so that you guys can be fully prepared going into the waiver wire period to make the best possible full rosters that you can. If you are new to the channel, if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. It helps me continue to do what I love so I can keep giving you the content that you love. And without any further ado, let's get into this week's waiver wire rankings. We're going to start with someone we talked about last week, but he deserves mentioning again, and that is quarterback Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, Trey did obviously not wow anyone through the air last week. He completed just over half of his passes for 192 yards, so not great. However, where he did impress was on the ground. He had 16 carries for 89 rushing yards, which is a huge boost to his fantasy potential. In addition to that, he had about 50 yards that were called back on holding penalties from that offensive line of San Francisco, and he was stopped inches short of a rushing touchdown as well. So you put those into consideration, and he could have had a giant day. Now they're saying Garoppolo might get his job back after the bye. Whatever, he can have it for now. What I'm really looking at for Lance is week 10 and beyond, when the job should be his, and that excellent matchups that they have there. We're going to talk a little bit about Taylor Heineke as well next, and that is because he certainly had a poor week, which we predicted against that tough New Orleans defense. Now guess what, guys? He has back-to-back excellent matchups the next 2 weeks. He gets Green Bay after he gets Kansas City this week. We know that Kansas City gives up a ton of points. He's going to be just fine in that one. I expect him to go for 20 plus in these next 2. A couple drop candidates that I have at the quarterback position. The first one is Justin Fields. And this is not about the player. Love the player. It's just the offense he's in and the potential right now. When we look at David Montgomery being out, that offense is going to struggle. When we look at Matt Nagy still being in charge, that offense is going to struggle. And it's going to take time for these guys to find their groove. And I just think that there are better options for you guys to spend your roster spots on than him. Next up, we have Mac Jones, and I would just say the same ditto on Mac Jones. This offense is not lighting up the scoreboard anytime soon. They're going to continue to run the ball. So far, Mac Jones doesn't have a finish in the top 20, so he hasn't been impressive in that aspect. And after Dallas this week, which is a decent matchup, they get back-to-back minus matchups. So even moving forward, I don't love it. Let's find a better way to use our roster spot. We're now going to move to running backs, and we're going to start with one of the major injuries yesterday, and that was Saquon Barkley going down with that ankle. Devontae Booker is the guy that slides in here, and it's likely that Saquon misses at least a couple weeks. Now, it was a low ankle sprain and not a high ankle sprain, so that is great for Barkley owners, as it's not going to be a super extended stay, at least we think. Now, Booker was able to add 13 yards receiving to his 42 rushing yards, and he scored twice. He does have a really tough matchup against the Rams coming up this week, but there's going to be enough volume where he's going to be in that low-end RB2, high-end flex conversation. Samanjee Piren had a great week last week with 15 touches, totaling 83 yards, and he also scored. So if you started him, you were rewarded. Now, Joe Mixon still played. He had 11 carries for 33 yards, and he saved owners' days by getting in the end zone in the 4th quarter. It looks like Mixon is working his way back to 100%. Piren, however, ended up on the COVID list this morning, Monday morning. So he is probably going to be out of commission, which makes Chris Evans the next man up in that Cincinnati backfield if Mixon isn't back to 100 or close to full-on usage this weekend. Moving to Kansas City, where we talk about another unfortunate injury for owners, and that was Clyde Edwards-Helaire going down late in the 3rd quarter. Daryl Williams slides in here. As of now, it looks like CEH dodged a major injury. They're saying it is an MCL sprain. So it's going to be a week-to-week thing. It could be 2. He might go on the short-term IR for 3 weeks, but it's not going to be a season ender, so that is great news. Williams is going to see touches in this offense. We know Kansas City is high powered. They're going to continue to score, so I want a piece if I can get it. I would go after Daryl Williams aggressively. Next up is Khalil Herbert out of Chicago, and he grabs our attention immediately with his 18 carries for 75 yards last week. It was clear that he's the backup still to Damian Williams, that much is sure, but with that many touches in an offense, we want a piece of it. So if he is available, he's a great stash. He's probably not a starter for you, but there are worse options you could have. We're going to move to New England and talk about a couple backs who might be seeing their usage increase here in the next couple of weeks. It starts with Randre Stevenson, who did have 11 carries. Now, he did total just 23 yards with them, but it's nice to see that usage, specifically after Damian Harris fumbled at the goal line and could potentially be in Bill Belichick's doghouse, which we know that is a horrible place to be. The other guy that I want to touch on is Brandon Bolden. Now, he only had 2 carries. He turned that into 25 yards, which is great, but it's the passing work that really is where he shines. He was also able to catch all 4 of his targets. They play Dallas this week, so they're probably going to be behind, probably have to throw. Bolden is a great option in PPR leagues. We don't know what it looks like, so keep a close eye on this backfield. Our final add at the running back position is Tyson Williams for Baltimore, who's available in nearly 70% of leagues. I get why, right? He was a healthy scratch last week. We have no idea what workload he's going to get, if any, but reports are out there saying teams are hitting up Baltimore for running backs. Maybe Tyson moves, maybe one of his teammates moves, but that should create more opportunities. And so far this year, Williams has been the best runner outside of Lamar Jackson in this offense, averaging 6 yards a carry. You got to think eventually more opportunities are going to come from somewhere, and I want that lottery ticket just in case. We're now going to move to our drop candidates at running back, and it starts with the entirety of the Houston Texans backfield. These guys aren't going to score consistently. There's 3 of them. It looks like Mark Ingram's the guy, but he's still not doing much. And we just don't know week to week what that workload is going to look like. I don't want any part of it. If you have one, find a better option. Next, we're going to move to Malcolm Brown. And if you saw what Myles Gaskin did last week against the Bucs, you know exactly why. Brown's certainly going to get a few touches here and there, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough touches, and it doesn't look like it's the touches that you want in that offense. And finally, it's Ronald Jones. I would say ditto to what we talked about. If you saw Leonard Fournette last week, he is the guy there. Ronald Jones is not getting nearly enough volume to consider a spot. Get rid of him. Look for someone else who can help you out. We now move to wide receiver options available on the wire this week, and it starts with Kadarius Toney for the Giants. Their room, wide receiver-wise, is all banged up. There are injuries everywhere. Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slade. They're all toast right now. In their absence, Toney exploded this week. He had 10 catches on 13 targets for 189 yards. They also get great matchups in 2 out of the next 3 weeks. So I'm not exactly sure what the split is going to be when these guys get back, but for now, as one of the clear only options in this offense, he is well worth an add. Marquez Callaway is next for us, and he comes with an asterisk because the Saints are actually on bye next week, number 1, and number 2, Michael Thomas is going to be back sooner rather than later. But Callaway did have 2 touchdowns this past week. Now, one of them, and 60% of the yards he had, was on one Hail Mary at halftime. It was a fluke, so you take that with a grain of salt. He's still produced fairly well, and he's worth a spot to at least sit on your rosters. After a couple off weeks, Rondale Moore saw his ownership decline significantly. He is still worth a roster spot. He is going to be a dart throw whenever you play him. There are just too many mouths to feed in that Arizona offense for there not to be off weeks for these guys. However, the throw is pretty good, as Moore led his team in rushing yards this week and also caught 5 out of his 6 targets for 59 yards. He is well worth a roster spot and is going to be a weekly boomer bust wide receiver 3. Next up is a guy I'm going to continue talking about until his ownership increases, and that is Hunter Renfro of the Las Vegas Raiders. He is still available, guys, in 50% of leagues. He's wide receiver 21 in the season. Come on, people. Now, he doesn't have a high ceiling, I understand that, but his floor is excellent. He has 17 catches on 22 targets for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Get this guy on your roster if he's available. Next up is the rookie out of Minnesota, Rashad Bateman, now of the Baltimore Ravens. He is coming back off of being injured this year so far, and there should be ample opportunities in an offense that has drop issues all over the field. Marquis Brown, Sammy Watkins, talking to you guys. So we like the opportunity here. He is not someone you're starting anytime soon, but he's certainly worth a speculative add just in case he starts to produce. Our final add at wide receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. He has back-to-back games with 8 targets. He's had 135 yards in that span. Now, certainly they're going to get healthier. Eventually, Daryl Williams will be back, but until that happens, it looks like this guy is the wide receiver 1 in Detroit for a team that is going to be behind and throwing often. Moving to the drop candidates for wide receivers, we start with Zach Pascal, who has not finished inside the top 60 at wideouts in the last 2 weeks. They're also getting T.Y. Hilton back from injury, which further takes away from his target share. And he's got Carson Wentz throwing him the ball still, so move along, find someone else. Next up is Nelson Aguilar, who has not had more than 3 catches in his last 4 weeks. His best finish in that time is wide receiver 57. There's not a lot of upside in this offense, and you can find a better spot somewhere else. Next up is Terrence Marshall, and he's just not seeing the target share in Carolina that makes him worth a roster spot. He has 14 targets since week 1. That's not going to cut it, so find another option. Finally, it's Elijah Moore, once again stuck in a horrible passing offense in New York. He also has to contend with Jamison Crowder and Corey Davis. Those guys are soaking up targets. And in the last 2 weeks, he has just 8 targets and 22 yards. Not a guy I want on my roster. Moving now to tight ends available on the waiver wire that might be of use to us. We start with Evan Ingram and the Giants, and it's all about the opportunity. We talked about the banged up pass catchers and that situation there. He's going to see ample opportunity to produce. He has 16 targets in the last 3 weeks and 103 yards in that span. Next up is Hunter Henry of the Patriots, and he gets a great matchup this week against Dallas. Not only that, he has touchdowns in back-to-back games, and he has looked like the clear receiving tight end, whereas Jonnu Smith has moved more towards that blocking role. Finally, the last tight end we're considering rostering this week is Zach Ertz of the Philadelphia Eagles. I get it, he had a dud last week against Carolina. Thankfully, he did still have 6 targets, so you love to see the opportunity, but prior to that, he had 10 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown in the previous 2. He now gets a Tampa Bay secondary that can't stop anybody. There's going to be options and opportunity for him to get some points. Our drop candidates at tight end start with Max Williams, who looks like he's going to have to go season-ending knee surgery. Our thoughts and prayers go out to him. Next up, it's Cole Comet. He has just 4 receptions and 39 yards over the last 3 weeks. And he's in that Bears offense, so we don't want none of that. Finally, Cameron Breit. There are just too many mouths to feed in Tampa Bay. Too many options for Brady, who's been spreading it around. And Breit had just 1 catch on his opportunities in a great matchup last week. I don't like any tight ends until Gronk is back. Finally, we're going to talk about our defense options for streamers in week 6. It starts with the Cardinals at the Browns. And I get it, the Browns just put up 42 points. So it is certainly a scary start. However, the Cardinals are currently ranked number 2 overall as a defense. They should get enough sacks and possibly force a turnover or 2 to make them worth a decent start here. If you didn't listen to me last week, maybe they're still available this week. The Dallas Cowboys have now had 3 straight finishes as a top 5 defense. They get New England, who isn't exactly lighting it up. So this is another streaming option for Dallas where they can succeed. A top 10 defense coming in. Indianapolis is a good option. If you are desperate, they get the Houston Texans, who aren't lighting up the scoreboard either. I know Davis Mills looked great last week, but I don't expect that to continue, and the Colts should be fine. And that's all we got for week 6 on the waiver wire. If you have any questions, any comments, drop them down below. If you're new or haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Avery Mopax. We'll see you next time.